Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into some source material covering what sounds like a critical day of witness testimony in the Sean Combs criminal case.
Yeah, we've got reports right from the courtroom, plus some legal analysis helping us sort of piece it all together.
And the idea is to pull out the really key bits from this one day. You've got celebrity accounts, hotel records, all sorts, and see how it fits, the prosecution's case and what the defense is trying to do.
Exactly. It's all about strategy at this point. Day 9. Sounds like it's pretty intense in there.
For sure. So let's dive in. The prosecution's building this RICO case, right? This pattern of alleged activity.
That's the framework, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to show an ongoing criminal enterprise. And this testimony, well, it seems aimed at adding bricks to that wall, linking specific alleged acts back to that bigger picture.
Okay, and the name everyone was talking about was Kid Cudi. Rapper Kid Cudi. His testimony was called a big bombshell in our sources. What's the story there?
All right, so Cudi testified about dating Cassie Ventura back around 2011, and he described this sequence of events in December 2011, apparently right after Diddy found out they were together.
Found out. And how did that escalate? What did Cudi say happened?
Well, he testified he got a call from someone he called a Diddy employee, saying they were at Cudi's house, his Hollywood home.
Whoa, so what did he do?
He said he immediately drove home and actually called Diddy while he was driving there.
Okay.
And he recounted this tense conversation, asking Diddy, "Are you in my house?" And Diddy apparently said he just wanted to talk and basically confirmed, "Yeah, I'm here now," just as Cudi was pulling up.
Wow. But then Diddy wasn't actually there when Cudi arrived.
That's the twist, yeah.
Yeah.
He gets there, the employee's gone, Diddy's gone. But Cudi testified about what he did find.
Which was?
Signs someone had definitely been inside, security cameras, moved, angled away specifically.
And
he mentioned these Chanel gifts he had out for his family on the kitchen counter, gone. And maybe the weirdest detail, his dog, which he said usually roamed free, was locked in the bathroom.
Locked in the bath. Those are specific details. How do those little things, the cameras, the gifts, even play into the case before we get to the bigger stuff?
Well, the prosecution could argue it shows intent. Not just being there, but trying to hide the fact they were there or what they were doing. Moving cameras. That points towards something clandestine, right? It sets a certain tone.
Right, laying groundwork. And then, just a month later, January 2012, things apparently got much worse.
Yeah, Cudi testified. His dog watcher calls him. Says his Porsche is on fire.
On fire.
Yeah. He described images shown to the jury look like the top was cut open, like maybe a Molotov cocktail dropped inside.
And his reaction in court. Our sources mentioned it.
Just, what the F? Pretty understandable, I guess.
So how did he connect that back to Combs?
He testified that the very next day, he met with Diddy at this members-only club Soho House, it seems. And Cudi described walking in, seeing Diddy standing alone, looking out a window, hands behind his back. He even said it was like a Marvel supervillain pose. Quite the image.
Definitely paints a picture. What did they talk about?
They talked about Cassie. Cudi said it seemed like neither of them knew the other was dating her at the same time.
Awkward. Did he ask about the car?
He did. And he testified Diddy denied having anything to do with it. Flat out denial.
Okay. But that wasn't the end of it. There was another encounter later.
Yeah. Fast forward to 2015. They run into each other again, apparently also at Soho House.
And
Cudi testified Diddy pulled him aside and apologized for everything that happened.
Everything that happened. How did Cudi take that apology?
He said he basically made peace with it then, mostly because he just didn't expect an apology at all. But interestingly, he also testified that even then, he still thought Diddy was lying about the car fire itself.
So peace, but maybe not full belief. Okay. Now let's talk about the courtroom atmosphere when Cudi testified. Sounds like a big moment. Any interaction between him and Combs?
It seems like people are really watching for that. The reports described Cudi walking down the aisle. Combs was apparently looking forward at first. Then he looked over as Cudi crossed some point, a threshold they called it. But apparently Cudi had already passed, so no actual eye contact was made.
Right.
And during the testimony itself, Cudi seemed focused on the lawyers. Combs was reportedly talking with his attorneys when Cudi finished and left. So yeah, the reports highlighted sort of a lack of interaction between the two former boyfriends of Ventura.
Okay, so a very dramatic story from Kid Cudi. Then comes the cross-examination. What was the defense, led by Brian Steele, trying to achieve with him?
Okay, so the defense strategy seemed pretty clear. They wanted to use Cudi's testimony to bolster their narrative.
Which is?
That Cassie Ventura wasn't controlled or coerced by Combs, that she was making her own decisions, having her own relationships, basically undermining the victim narrative.
And how did they try to get that across using Kid Cudi?
Well, Steele asked him a lot about his relationship with Cassie in 2011. Got Cudi to confirm they were talking basically every day for most of that year.
Okay.
And that Cudi's understanding at the time was that she wasn't with Combs anymore. Setting the stage, you see.
Right. And then came the really direct question, didn't it?
Exactly. Steele put it right to him. Said something like, the person who played you is the same person who played Sean. Is this Ventura true?
Wow. And Cudi's answer?
True.
True. That must have been a moment the defense wanted the jury to hear loud and clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it. If they can get Cudi, who the prosecution presented, to agree Cassie played both him and Combs, well, that paints her as someone capable of managing complex situations, maybe even deception.
Someone with agency.
Precisely. It pushes back hard against the idea that she was completely under Combs' thumb, unable to leave or make her own choices. It suggests she was making choices, maybe ones that hurt both men.
It's really something how one word, true, can be leveraged like that. But Cudi wasn't the only witness that day, was he?
No, the prosecution brought in others, too. There was a makeup artist, Miles Morales. She'd worked for both Diddy and Cassie.
And her testimony was about something else entirely.
Very different, yes. It focused on alleged physical abuse. She talked about an incident back in 2010 at a hotel. Said she saw Cassie right after Diddy had allegedly beaten her.
Okay. What did she say she saw? What was Cassie's condition, according to her?
It was pretty graphic testimony based on the reports. She described Cassie as battered, beaten, mentioned specific things like knots on her head, black eye, busted lip, a lot of knots all over her.
That's difficult to hear.
Yeah. And she also testified that she let Cassie stay with her for a few days right after that. So it's a direct account from someone claiming to have seen the immediate aftermath of alleged violence. Powerful stuff for the prosecution if the jury believes it.
Definitely adds another layer. And then there was a hotel manager from Beverly Hills. That sounds maybe less dramatic.
Less dramatic on the surface, maybe, but potentially useful for the prosecution in other ways. This testimony was about hotel records, specifically from Diddy's stays.
Hotel records? What kind of details are we talking about?
Well, they apparently show the jury actual notes from hotel staff. Things like Combs always spilled candle wax on everything and uses excessive amounts of oil.
Candle wax and oil. How is that relevant?
And also that the room needed to be put out of order upon departure for deep cleaning.
Deep cleaning? Okay, I'm still trying to see the connection.
Look, on its own, maybe it's nothing. But in a RIO case, you're building a picture, a pattern. Sometimes details about behavior, demands on staff, the state things are left in. They can add texture. They might corroborate timelines or locations mentioned in other testimony, or just contribute to this overall image the prosecution is trying to create of how the alleged enterprise operated, the kind of footprint it left.
Right, kind of like background details that make the whole scene feel more real or support other claims. Okay. So we've got Cudi's story, the intrusion, the car fire, the meetings. We've got Miles Morales' account of alleged abuse. And these hotel notes. Now let's bring in the legal analysis. How does this testimony, especially Kid Cudi's, actually impact the big picture of the Archie case? Does it really move the needle, as they say?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And initially, some commentators wondered if Cudi's story was maybe more drama than direct legal proof for Archie.
But others disagreed.
Strongly. Yeah, legal experts like former federal prosecutor Elise Adamson, quoted in our sources, argued it absolutely does move the needle. And the reasoning is pretty specific.
Okay, lay it out for us. Why is it so relevant?
Because arson burning Kid Cudi's car is actually listed as one of the predicate offenses in the indictment.
Predicate offense, meaning one of the underlying crimes they need to prove happened?
Exactly. To get a RICO conviction, they need to prove a pattern of these underlying crimes committed as part of this alleged criminal enterprise. Arson's on that list.
So Cudi's testimony potentially provides evidence for one of those necessary building blocks.
Precisely. Now, Cudi didn't say, I saw Sean Combs light the match. The defense definitely hammered that point on cross-examination. He didn't see who did it.
Right. So how does the prosecution overcome that?
This is where it gets interesting. They connect the dots. They presented Cudi's testimony after the jury had already heard from Cassie Ventura.
And Cassie had testified.
Cassie had previously testified that Sean Combs had actually threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car.
Ah. So they present the alleged threat, then they present the alleged act happening shortly after.
You got it. threat, then fire. The prosecution draws that line for the jury. They argue, look, Combs was angry about Cudi and Cassie. He allegedly threatened the car, and then boom, the car burns. They want the jury to infer the connection, even without an eyewitness, to the arson itself. And analysts call this linkage a huge score for the prosecution.
Yeah.
Okay, so the prosecution uses Cudi plus Cassie to support the arson charge, which helps the RECO case. But, like we said, the defense uses Cudi's true answer about Cassie playing them.
To argue she wasn't controlled, she had agency, which hurts the prosecution's overall narrative of coercion. It's a perfect example of how both sides try to spin the same testimony their way.
Yeah, it really highlights the battle over narrative, doesn't it? The prosecution is trying to build this structure of related criminal acts driven by control.
Using things like the alleged arson, the alleged assault Miles Morales described, maybe even those hotel notes, as tiny bits of context.
While the defense is chipping away at it, questioning credibility, pointing out lack of direct evidence for some things, and crucially, arguing the alleged victims, like Cassie, were actually independent actors.
It's fascinating to watch unfold. You really have to track how each piece of testimony is presented, challenged, and then potentially woven into these competing stories for the jury.
Understanding these moments, like Kid Cudi's testimony or Miles Morales' account, is just crucial if you want to follow what's happening. It shows how these big, complex cases are built piece by piece, witness by witness, argument by argument, from torch cars to hotel cleaning protocols.
It really makes you think about how facts or alleged facts are presented and fought over in court.
Absolutely. Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you to chew on after this deep dive. We talked about how the defense used Kid Cudi's agreement that Cassie played both him and Diddy. How does that specific point sit alongside the prosecution's argument that Combs allegedly threatened Cudi's car because he was angry about the relationship with Cassie? Does arguing Cassie had agency somehow make the alleged motive for the arson weaker? Or does it just make the whole situation, the relationships and alleged actions presented in court, even more tangled and complex to unravel? Something to think about.